You're listening to Distraction Therapy with Rob Watson. Conversations about how we find meaning in our lives and what it's like to be part of a meta-modern world. Hello, it's Saturday the 23rd of July and this is Distraction Therapy with Rob Watson and Ryan Clayton.
Hello.
We are sat outside a coffee shop in Leicester on Market Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And
yeah,
we're just having another coffee. We've had one to kind of gear up. And we're just kind of watching the world go by. How are you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. I've not been doing much. To be honest. Again, like I told you earlier, trying to think of what I have been doing, but nothing. It's been too hot to do anything.
How have you coped?
Sleeping, mainly. Sleeping and watching crap films.
So tell us about that experience. So what would you go on, describe your experience, because we had like 3 days of unusual, unseasonably warm weather. How was the experience for you?
What's the number say?
Stifling. Great deal of lethargy. I just sort of sat around not really doing that much. It was too hot to even focus on reading. I mean, I did watch a couple of films that were not interesting, but brain-numbing enough for me to be able to sit through them in the heat. I think I watched an Adam Sandler film called Blended, where 2 single parents fall in love during a trip to Africa. That was intriguing, to say the least.
Was there nothing else you could have watched?
And I also watched He's Just Not That Into You, which was quite fun because it was so poorly written. It almost felt like parody. Everybody in the film was beyond delusional and had absolutely no common sense.
So it was spot on as a social documentary then, was it?
Now that you phrase it like that, yeah, I think it might have been.
Yeah. It's the perfect embodiment of the contemporary cultural domain.
What else did I do? I started... Sorry, I'm being told that I'm using the microphone wrong. I started reading Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, and that was quite fun. I enjoyed how conversational it was when the topic, the subject matter is quite larger than life, you know, like angels and demons, heaven and hell and that sort of stuff, and the way in which it humanises these characters that otherwise are, well, biblical. But, yeah, like I said, the heat was just so oppressive that I felt like I couldn't really do that much.
Lethargy.
Yeah, exactly. An overwhelming feeling of lethargy, like I just sort of had to stop for a couple of days and not really do anything.
Imagine how you'd have coped in the 19th century when you couldn't have taken your overcoat off, regardless of the weather.
I think at that point, suicide might have been a viable alternative.
Probably one of the primary reasons for it.
Yeah.
You know, you can imagine being in... I was reading about, is it Rimbaud? I can never know if I pronounce it, the French poet.
Oh, I was thinking Sylvester Stallone, but yeah.
I've obviously mispronounced it, but and he's the one who kind of became a tramper, and people would... You know, Paris was, you know, until... the Second World War, really. Prior to that, it was a real dump, and you know, people had to escape in the hot weather because it stunk, and the heat was just, you know, Paris is a much warmer city than, despite being relatively close to London geographically. It's got the continental weather, so it's much more significantly consistent in its hot weather. But in the summertime, it was just, that's why Versailles is outside of Paris.
Yeah.
Because you had to escape it, because otherwise the stench and the
I can believe it. I mean, the stench in Leicester over this past heat wave was quite...
I think it was that bad.
You must be hanging out in circles where people actually wash then, Rob.
Well, there is I don't hang around with that many people. So, and I didn't visit the Haymarket bus station, but... or get any buses anywhere. So actually, I did get one bus somewhere, but that wasn't too bad. Nobody was on the bus.
You didn't go clubbing during the heat wave then, Rob?
No, I didn't. I'm afraid. Those days are over. I didn't go and find any pools in quarries to go and swim in or anything like that. No, but I don't understand the impulse. The British impulse to try and cool down and to go to the beach and to strip off when you've not acclimatised to any. It's like people getting off the plane to go to Benidorm and just, 1 minute they're in a factory or in an office, and the next minute they're sprawled on a beach, and the white translucent skin just reacts instantly to and they come away like lobsters, which there's an element of it that are kind of...
Several burnt vampires getting back onto the plane.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of after spending 2 weeks feeling sick because you've got sunstroke, and the only thing that you think that compensates for it is beer. So we're not very well adapted to I mean, what do you think we need to do to adapt to? Because there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about climate change and climate crisis, and some remarks were made about we're going to have to get used to it, and this is the kind of thing we'll experience a lot more often and for much more sustained periods of time. And some of it was pretty horrible. Those the kind of wildfires and stuff.
Yeah.
They were pretty drastic, but at the same time, culturally we're not very well adapted to it.
Well, I don't know how you do get used to something like that when it only really happens for like 3 to 5 days at a time, because there was a little bit of build up to it, wasn't there? I mean, the weekend was still very hot, but then it just shot up astronomically on Monday and especially Tuesday, and then immediately curtailed. I mean, it was raining, wasn't it, yesterday, and it was quite miserable and grey. It still wasn't cold, but it was something like...
It was back to a normal British summer.
Yeah, well, it was 20 degrees colder than it had been on the Tuesday. So to get used to something like that, I feel like there needs to be not only like a build-up for you to slowly acclimatise to it, but also for it to happen over more of a prolonged period of time, because by the end of Tuesday, when you've kind of just about gotten used to it and you think, okay, I think I'm just about figuring out how to deal with this, suddenly the temperature plummets again.
Well, the prospect of dealing with it for, say, 3 or 4 months of the year just doesn't, I think it'd send people into a headspin in this country.
You'd have to change entirely how you live. I mean, you were talking about earlier, you just have to go somewhere else where it's cooler, move to a different part of the world for a little bit and just hang out there until it's cooled down. So...
Well, it was things like, the house wouldn't cool down, and when you got to that point where it was, it did drop down to 19, 20 degrees, you could open all the doors and windows and the heat finally managed to escape. But we have the opposite problem in the winter, whereby we're trying to retain the heat in our houses, and so you want to trap the heat, and you've got this two extremes that we're just not, like we get snow, in England anyway. Very rarely, and so we don't spend money on adapting vehicles. We don't change tyres for the winter, all that kind of stuff. Whereas in the summer, it's like you'd be lucky if people take their overcoats off.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know, spending more time outside is one of the ways you cope with it. Like, I mean, on Tuesday, for one, I didn't go back inside until it was absolutely necessary, because you just know that as soon as you step inside, you're just going to melt, and you can't sleep, you can't really do anything or focus. You just sat there sweating, trying to drink enough water to compensate for the fluids that you've lost through the sweat, and it feels like you're starting to battle the weather. So I just don't know.
Well, you're battling your own body.
Yeah.
Your ability, and as you get older, your ability to regulate, this is why it's dangerous for people in the kind of 70s and 80s and beyond, it, because you can't regulate your own, the heat that well. People can become very obstinate about things like drinking plenty of water. I mean, I've friends in the past who just refuse to have a sleep. They don't sleep in the night because it's too hot, but then they won't have a sleep in the afternoon. I can't go and have a sleep. It's like admitting defeat. It's like, well, go.
No, you absolutely
for 3 or 4 hours.
You absolutely can have a nap. It's probably one of the better ways to deal with it. I remember Sunday when it was just starting to get hot. I woke up in the morning, enjoyed my morning, and then by 2 o'clock, I'd gone back to bed again, and I thought, no, I'm going to sleep through this. Woke back up at 6, and then went for just a nice, pleasant walk, hung out by the river, and just sort of enjoyed the day.
Yeah, that's kind of how you've got to do it. You can't. you can't be dogmatic about it. You've got to learn to be flexible and to make sure that you're sufficiently, what's the word I'm looking for?
Robust enough?
No, I think it's the other way around, actually. I think it's kind of, you've built slippage into your day and your week, and if you're task-driven, which a lot of the frustration comes from, because what I find happens is my ability to focus on and concentrate on the tasks, so I can only do them in small bursts, and if I'm too hot and uncomfortable, and which my kind of home study just became too hot to sit and feel that you can work, but you've got to be able to get away from that, and it's any kind of longer. That's why you go on holiday to somewhere warm, because you want to stop doing all of that kind of having checklists of tasks that you want to do, and deadlines that you've got to meet, and people that you've got to reply to, and invoices you've got to submit, and all that kind of stuff.
There's like an obsession with productivity, to the point where when it gets that hot and it becomes, let's face it, almost impossible to be productive in the same way that you were before, because the weather is actively battling you, there comes a point where you just need to accept that you're not going to become as productive, and build in those methods of dealing with the heat into your day-to-day life. But it's like...
Well, you have to be smarter about it. Productivity is not the amount of work that you do. It's the minimum input for the maximum output that you're going to get. And rather than that, spending an hour writing each email that has 800 words in it, you send a message that has 5 words in it.
Yeah. Or also maybe
achieve the same thing.
Or also perhaps maybe recognizing that what you're doing isn't that important, and it's fine not to do it, because nobody
cares.
Yeah, nobody cares. Nobody's going to die. It's not going to impact anybody in a negative way if you don't do it. Just get over it.
And make sure that those people who have got those kind of jobs that you kind of need, that essential service there is free. So don't do anything stupid either. I think that's the other thing. It's like kind of the temptation to it's easily there. It's almost as if people are on a very, when it gets warm, if it stays warm in the UK, you're never far away from riots, because people just can't handle it, because you're on a narrower ledge. There's less latitude in their emotional responses to things, because people are just too warm.
I noticed that it does certainly bring everybody, including my own, emotions to the top. Like, you're constantly at a boiling point, waiting for everything to spill over, and it doesn't take much for everything to spill over.
Yeah, just a small, inconsequential frustration can turn into somebody losing it. Fortunately, I've not seen that this year. Usually, though, in the past, growing up in this country, you kind of, in the summer, there's often an incident at some point in the summer where you realise that somebody's been, usually on a Sunday, if we get a hot day on a Sunday, and people go out drinking all day.
Yeah.
And then there's fights in the street, and there's you see somebody walking up and down the street deranged, shouting. And
that's the killer. I remember I went out on Saturday, and it was still not quite as hot as it got Tuesday, obviously, but it was still hot. And the beginning of the night was fine. Everybody was having a good time. And then by the end of the night, I was at the Athena, and you walk out, and there's a girl on the floor in like a tinfoil blanket, like just absolutely gone, and there's another girl outside of the smoking area screaming because she's being kicked out, and you're just thinking, how do you not know how to deal with all of this properly? You've not adapted well enough to the heat, and just don't be stupid.
I don't think that's something that I guess I would get the T-shirt made.
Yeah, don't be stupid.
But it's easier said than done, isn't it? You get those things of people leaving dogs in cars. How many times have people been warned, on a hot day, do not leave your dog in the car? And yet you see the reports of one of the main tasks that police had to do was to go and smash windows on cars because the dogs were literally boiling away inside. And you think...
Yeah. Well, again, it's probably because people do it all the time anyway. And so it becomes an inconvenience to do it, even if you have to, when the weather changes. And people aren't receptive enough to that change.
Is there something fundamental about people's attention management? and about where it is that I don't know. I don't know how to frame this in a way. It's like kind of your day-to-day attention. It moves forward along predictable, comfortable kind of lines, if you like. There's a pathway laid out, and then occasionally you'll reach a part of the pathway where it narrows and your choices are less because the heat's gone up or the temperature's gone down, and there's something where it's an obstacle in your way. But how many people don't consider or give any forethought to? I mean, I was planning my break. I emailed people and let them know that during the hot weather. Somebody asked me to go to a meeting at like 1 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and I said no. I said, meet you at 9 o'clock, but I'm not going to be out in that. I'm going to be I know I'll be asleep that time of day. It's just it'd be stupid for me to be outside. And they changed it. They realised themselves. But do you not look at the weather forecast in advance to see planning?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, we had ample warning that it was going to happen, and still people were obstinate enough to think, no, I'm going to go about my day. I mean, on Tuesday, I was, during like the height of the heat wave, sat in a meeting at like 2 o'clock that quite frankly I didn't need to be there for. None of us needed to be there for, because it's not like it's even remotely important. And I was mostly fine because I was sat in an office with air conditioning where the heat didn't really touch you. But there were other people on the Zoom call with kids during the summer holiday, and you could hear them like playing around with water in the garden, and they're still there on the Zoom call trying to wrangle their kids and stay cool and make sure everything that quote unquote needed to get done got done.
Nobody turns around and says, should we postpone this Zoom call till Thursday?
Yeah, nobody sits there.
Because I've looked at the weather forecast and it's only going to be 19 degrees on Thursday.
Yeah, Nobody sits there and says, actually, it's kind of ridiculous that we're doing this now, isn't it? With everything that's going on and all of the things that I have to juggle.
Should we come back to this?
Yeah.
Are we in imminent danger of missing an important dedeline for funding or something? In which case, why didn't we start this earlier?
I mean, no deadline is that important, Rob. Nothing that I do in particular is important enough to really sweat it out like that.
No.
But
no. It's a thing of presenteeism. There was something I was reading which was Carl Jung talks about, which is the fear of chaos and the kind of we live in this delusional state that we live in about order. And it was really useful for me to read it, because it talked about we think we live in a conscious world. We think our ego tells us that we're in charge of our actions and that we have a rational way of engaging with the world. But actually, we don't just dream at the night time, but we're dreaming constantly. It's just that our conscious ego during the daytime, our waking period, feels like it's in charge and can direct us a little bit more than it would do normally. But really underneath or beyond that, it's a constant process of kind of we live in a dream world, so you get slips, you get malapropisms, you get synchronicities, you get all these things which kind of just happen, and you're not as so in control of it as you might wish to feel that you are. However, it was the idea of kind of we are so afraid of the chaos that to think and to advocate for anything that might lessen our control or potential control over that chaos is a terrifying prospect for people. It's like, is that and does the weather, does that shift and change in the weather indicate that we, that sense of that loss of control?
Yeah.
That's what the frustration. It's actually fear of the loss of control.
Well, I think that's an important realization for most people. Really, is the idea that you're not even remotely as in control of your life and the things around you that you think you are. And all it takes is a little recognition of that to become a lot more comfortable around you and the things that are going on. And it does lead to more of that flexibility. Once you realize that you're not in control, like an inconvenience like the heat to your productivity just becomes part of that not battle but negotiation with the chaos, and you can realize like, well, okay, it's fine that I can't do as much today as I wanted to, or perhaps might have done on a regular Tuesday, because these factors that I'm not in control of have impacted my life in a fairly significant way. It is unusual that we get like temperatures of 40 degrees in England.
But and it's the point where nobody is in control.
Yeah.
And very few people can control that situation. You collectively, we can't say, who do you turn to at that point? Because clearly the emergency services, the police and the fire brigade and the ambulance services were on the point that this is where you do generally use a word like heroics of keeping those services going in those circumstances is incredible. To have that kind of mindset where you keep some kind of order against those kind of conditions. When you see the pictures of the wildfires and things.
Yeah.
So I recognise my limitations, but on a general basis, it's like everybody suddenly goes, we can't do it. You just got to let it wash over you. You can't do anything about this. And then when we get back to that point where the weather kind of dips back towards normality, or what we typically experience, then you feel a little bit more in control again. But you aren't.
No. But it's interesting that it takes something that severe for people to even get close to recognise that lack of control and then still refuse to recognise it. Like the amount of people that I spoke to and met on the run up to Monday, Tuesday and on Monday and Tuesday that just failed to accept the fact that they weren't in control of the weather was incredible.
But that air conditioning gives you a false sense of security.
Yeah.
What were you telling me about your car?
Oh my God! The fact that I don't have air conditioning in my car was
just awful. I mean, I think that's such a bad thing for anybody to go through. Not have an air con.
It was horrible because my car is very cheap and very crap. The fact that I had to drive to work on Tuesday in what is essentially an oven. And before I even got to work, my shirt was moist with sweat, and then I had to get into the office and sit there, and it takes 30 minutes for you to then reacclimatise and think, okay, well, I need to take a moment because I'm just so sweaty and already exhausted. It
was one of the reasons I'm a big fan of trams, because everywhere I've been to, when it's been on holiday and it's a hot day, you get on the tram, you sit on the tram, drive around because the aircon's great.
Yeah.
They're really well designed, whereas we don't have that option here in Leicester. So you're forced to use a car.
Yeah.
You're forced to use a car which is way past its sensible. If it was a product in a supermarket, it's way past its sell-by date and use-by date.
Yeah.
Really, we should be scrapping these things. En masse. But there's no alternative. There's no structural alternative in place for using trams and buses.
Especially not because I don't even work that far outside of Leicester. It's maybe 3-4 miles outside of Leicester. But
you wouldn't cycle.
No, you couldn't do it. I mean, you could do it, but not on a day like Tuesday. And there's no infrastructure in place there for me. There's one bus that is also not air conditioned, which isn't an acceptable alternative. The abiding memory of buses for me is I remember this from school, so this is going way back. At least 70 years.
It's going back into the did we have buses then?
Yeah.
But the big diesel engine at the back of the bus, and you'd sit there, and you just at the back seat downstairs, or if you're on a single decker at the back, above this huge, enormous, incredibly noisy diesel engine, just pumping out noise and the heat, and you kind of think, what the bus infrastructure is just, now we've got some electric and hydrogen buses coming in gradually, and you hope they're going to make a difference, but it's kind of, I remember the buses didn't really those big diesel engine buses, the Scania, is it, hadn't really changed for 40 years, 50, 60 years. There was still basically the same thing, a massive, huge diesel engine on a platform where people sit around with no air conditioning, and to get some kind of air you have to open the window, which lets in all the pollution the room, and then you get your face gets blown off because the wind, when it starts picking up speed, the wind kind of comes in,
and then when it's really hot, opening the windows doesn't do much to cool you down either.
Makes it hotter.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just no way for you to win if you get on a bus.
And I remember the days when kind of smoking was, you could smoke upstairs on the buses, and it's like, so you know, if you didn't want to sit amongst the tobacco smoke, you'd go downstairs and you'd just boil. And it's like,
Well, I don't even know how people, when it's as hot as it was, I don't know how you'd get away with smoking inside. I smoked far less than I usually do, just because you stand there in the heat and the last thing you want is to be huffing smoke into your lungs.
The Spanish for a long time were quite happy to chug away with the French. We thought they were. They'd never give up cigarettes, but they seem to be. I think that's the point of banning them in restaurants. But I don't know. Smoking on the beach these days, it's my favourite haunt. So one of the interesting things I was trying to think about with this was, if you like, if there's the media narrative that gets created around this, and I didn't really watch much of the TV. I don't watch a lot of TV news now anyway, so I see a lot of mine through Twitter and things like that, and the news feeds on my phone, and the kind of coherent national response, and the kind of, it's almost as if there's a kind of fairly typically in these circumstances, the British bulldog spirit comes out of fortitude, and it was good enough for in the Blitz, and if you can't cope with it, you're a snowflake, and all that.
There is a slight difference, though, admittedly, between a heat wave and a war. So.
In some people's minds, I'm not so sure that bound. And it comes back to this delusional state, maybe continually, that you're constantly looking for a mythological narrative in which to explain those things that you can't control. So what you do is you impose something that you've experienced or you've had related through other narratives onto your experience now. So you always describe it. It was like, because not many people are saying. I mean, there was almost the point where it was expressed in some places as kind of being Armageddon, the apocalypse, the heat, and certainly the wildfires and stuff like that, because you're teetering on the edge of chaos. And there's two forms. Well, there's chaos as in the kind of maelstrom of heat and energy, and then there's the void. And we teeter kind of, both are related in terms of the two opposites, but that's our fear, being swallowed up by the void or being lost in chaos.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to know what that's like, they should just come to Leicester. Feel like we got swallowed up by the maelstrom a long time ago, and we're trying to claw our way out.
That's just, as people often tell me now, it's the same everywhere.
I don't think it's definitely not.
It's the same everywhere in the UK. So how what in terms of media terms then? What have you listened to anything, watched anything, read anything that has kind of helped you through this process?
Long silence there while I contemplated. I don't know, actually, to be honest, because during the heat wave in particular, I'm trying to think what I did Monday, but I don't think I did much of anything. I think when I got home, I simply lay down on my sofa with a fan directly in my face, and I watched The Simpsons because it was, I'd kind of seen most of them before, and it's very comfortable. I was kind of half
expecting you to say that, you kind of went up to your garret and you pottered around in your artist studio and you drank some absinthe and you went and debauched with some prostitutes, like some 19th century bohemian, fantasical, artist somewhere.
I don't know if I had the energy for that kind of debauchery, quite frankly.
So instead, it's like an arse on the sofa. Yeah. For me, that usually the thing for me is Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah.
That was my summertime. It's too hot to go out and do anything. I'll just watch some TV.
I tell you what I did do. A lot of the music that I listened to became a lot poppier.
Oh yeah.
A lot a lot more like bubblegum
Because you've got
pop.
quite a horrible taste of pop music,
I've got a
haven't you?
horrible taste in music. Yeah, you can't get more Philistine than my taste in music, because it's all over the place. One day I'll be listening to the Beatles or Pink Floyd, and then the next day it's Harry Styles and Selena Gomez. I'll tell you what I did listen to as well, and what I've gotten back into is like 1950s country music.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever heard of Marty Robbins?
Name ring sounds familiar.
Yeah, what a guy. His music is so
American.
Yeah, American, and so relentlessly sad. Like, the guy was just, he must have been chronically depressed.
Big market for that.
Yeah, because everything he sings about is either the fact that he's lost the love of his life, he's chronically lonely, or he tells these very succinct, like, Western stories about people dying and not being able to find love. It's brilliant stuff, and I managed to get an album on iTunes. I can't remember how much it was now, but it wasn't a lot. It couldn't have been a tenner. Of like 125 of his songs. So just get in the car and stick that on, and like listen to the slow, sad country music, and this guy talking about how he's going to die alone. That was quite good. That was like, oh, well, at least my life's not as bad as Marty Robbins. That's fine.
It makes you feel better.
Yeah, exactly. What's the title of one of his songs that always jumps out to me as quite funny because it's so on the nose? I think it's something like, I'm so lonesome I could cry. It's like that sets the tone for pretty much all of his music.
Well, I mean, you know, Elvis did quite a few, probably some covers of that kind of stuff as well. There's quite a lot of stuff that, you know, bittersweet, melancholia.
Yeah.
So you do have that, you know, it's an emotional expression. It's the kind of, because these things are like again, I was reading Jung about this. There's a cracking chapter in Man in Search of a Soul, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, which I'm trying to finish off at the moment, which is I picked up in a charity shop for about £3, which is great. It's a really good summation, and one of the chapters is about aesthetic experience and about artistic experience, and he said nothing that we do, it's one of the best frameworks for understanding art and aesthetic experience that I've read in a long time. It's kind of really simple, but it says it's compensation.
Yeah.
To understand not just the person who, you know, if you like, the artist, the creator, to understand their psychological state. He said it's a mistake to think, that, what's his name again,
Marty Robbins.
To sit there and say, well, what was it going through his mind when he wrote this? You know, to try and understand what the song is about by trying to relate it to the person. He says that's a big mistake. What you've got to do is step back from the song and ask, why does it resonate? You know, what's its purpose, if you like? What's it compensating for in the culture, in your experience of culture?
It's interesting because it seems like, I mean, my life at the moment, despite being quite depressing, has been very good, and I've been very happy. And it was, yeah, it doesn't happen often in this city, but it does every now and again. And so as a result of being very happy, I seem to have gravitated towards sadder and sadder music. And I don't know if that's a kind of balancing act or what, as if like I'm currently experiencing too much happiness and my mind sees that as unacceptable.
Well, it's almost maybe, I think, you are allowed to experience emotions, and that you're allowed to kind of, you know, we've talked about this before in terms of, you know, my ability to express sincerity. I was thinking
non-existent.
about this. I stayed up last night watching a program. You know, it's on Disney, Love Victor. Cool.
Oh, I think I have heard of that.
And it's trite, and it's young adult stuff. And it's about this young gay guy, and he's coming out and stuff. The first two series, I kind of skip through them and fast forward them. It's a bit soap opera-ish, and I was kind of, but there's something that always just kept me going back to it, and I think it is that. I don't think spoilers would be appropriate because I'm not really sure people are going to rush off and suddenly watch this series. But I stayed up till I watched all 8 episodes last night. I stayed up until like 2:00 in the morning watching it, and the thing that was striking about it was that it was a group of people who were explaining what their emotional state was, how they felt, and they, in order to get through the challenges of the relationships that they were engaged in, were forming and were part of, they couldn't bond, they couldn't move forward until they'd all reached a state of transparency about their emotional expression. And it kind of, I was thinking about it as I was trying to get off to sleep afterwards. It was like, yeah, I don't come from that kind of culture. I do not feel like I ever am allowed to express any kind of sense of genuine, authentic, sincere emotion. It always has to be checked by, how does this look outside? What are people's responses to this like? And except in extreme circumstances, is there a better way to ironise this?
Yeah.
So I was listening to I was flicking through YouTube, and there was a thing with Paul McCartney, some extracts from the readings that he did from his recent kind of biographical books about his lyrics and stuff. And he was talking about how he wrote a song which he talked about his love for John Lennon, and it was a response after John Lennon had been shot.
Oh, I think I've heard that song. Yeah.
Yeah, he performed it at Glastonbury.
Yeah, I think that's where I caught it. Yeah.
And he says, you just don't say those kind of things. There's always an ironic gesture that goes with it. There's a shrug. There's a wink or something with it. You don't say to somebody directly, "Yeah, I have an emotional relationship with you." That's completely absent.
Well, that was interesting to see him get up on stage before he performed that song, because there was a genuine sense of remorse that he never did that and that he never got to before he died, and so it felt like it all came out in the song.
Yeah, it was there. He said they got back to building a relationship again, and they were back on, because what he was describing on this piece was that he said, they went hitchhiking together, and he said John Lennon had this thing, if they'd be getting into a heated discussion, John would take his glasses off and go, "It's only me," and put his glasses back and say, kind of calm down. It's like, we're not, and he said that's how you grow up. You grew up in Liverpool in the 50s and 60s. You didn't have the, when you compare it to this kind of Americanized ideal that's coming through about, snowflake generation, being in touch with your emotions, things like that, is that actually it's deeper and richer. But at the same time, it's not that I'm going to suddenly burst out into. Don't worry, I'm not going to sit here and express any kind of emotion. I think I'm incapable of.
I thought some kind of musical number was about to burst into. Yeah,
the people running up and down the street. That's how we normally deal with it. You externalise it. So what you do is you turn it into a song and a dance piece. And it's like kind of all of a sudden there's people, performing cartwheels up and down the street, and you get so you go to the cinema to get your emotional release through. Now it's largely through violence, but the musical isn't as popular as it was. So people aren't devoid of emotion. It's just that if you can't express it personally yourself, it comes through in our aesthetic, in our culture.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about going back to you think about listening to sad songs, it's because it's like you have and what Jung says about emotions is he says we don't have emotions, they have us.
Yeah.
And you just got to ride with it. So I found myself over the Heatwave, kind of, that's the point where you realise I was feeling quite emotional, and I was thinking this can go either way. Either this can get turned into a massive inappropriate fight with somebody, or I can just kind of listen to some music and let it ride through and kind of but express it.
Yeah.
No, not a chance.
So that's not something you're gonna fold into your personal life then, try and become a more emotionally aware human being, better at expressing these things.
I'm emotionally aware, I'm just not able to express it. Sometimes it's a lost cause, I kind of quite like the glib sarcasm, the sardonic kind of response to stuff. But at the same time, you kind of think, well, there's got to be something where we've got to be more emotionally expressive and say what you mean and mean what you say, and be taken by other people on that basis. Because otherwise, when we come to things like a heatwave, I'm just trying to think of the cultural response to these extreme circumstances that we're facing. It might, the response might be we all need some cathartic expression.
Yeah.
Where we kind of let these emotions come out in some kind of way. And it's the Brits, it's very much the football crowd, the crowd in Paul McCartney at Glastonbury with the 250,000 people all singing along. But that's not enough. There's got to be your collective response, but then those people have got to go back to their lives. And, in your workplace when it gets too hot and everybody's frustrated, having a sing-along isn't something that we do. It's like
maybe a fight. Maybe if we were all to pile into the car park and start beating the crap out of each other.
Fight club. It comes out in that kind of hyper-aggressive masculinity or something. That's very American.
Yeah.
And it comes out in the music. When I listen to a lot of urban American music, and I think it's just the hyper-violence that's associated with it, and the kind of the aggressiveness that goes with it. And you think, I'm not that I want some kind of... the other extreme is the wishy-washy coffee shop music that you get.
Yeah.
Kind of somebody strumming away, doing a cover version of something, and it sounds weak and it's insipid, like a cup of tea that's not been brewed for more than like 5 seconds, and it's just literally coloured water. It's the equivalent of that. Whereas I like a good, strong coffee. Bold emotions. So you've not had where do we go after that?
Yeah, Maybe we should now break out into a fight.
No, I think maybe we kind of start the sing-along. I think that's what we've got to start doing, because we don't do that. I remember once being on holiday in Nîmes. It was a really hot day, because Nîmes gets hot. It's like 36 degrees consistently right the way through the summer anyway, so they've had gone up to 40, 42 degrees, that kind of thing. But we were outside there with my sister, and we were out, son was only young at the time, and we were there having a meal, and it's fairly late in the evening, about 11 o'clock, and there's a couple of tables away, similar to where we're sitting now. There's a table of these German women sitting around having a meal, like 20 of them. They just started singing. They just started breaking into song. They weren't drunk because they weren't drinking, but they just had a sing-along. It was so nice. And the popular songs you don't walk past a pub now and hear public singing. And when I'm just trying to think this through in terms of
unless it's Coming Home or something,
something kind of repetitively drilled into people, or you end up with people going to nightclubs and bars getting so mashed up that they fall on the pavement afterwards, and there's no emotional release. That's how we do it.
I mean, you saw presumably that video of me stood up on the tables at the Athena.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was on Instagram. I was quite amused by that. What was going on?
You should have. There was another one as well that I thought was quite funny. So we went to the Athena because Bongo's Bingo was on. Everybody gets drunk and gets up on the tables and starts generally very loud, vulgar, obscene. Lots of dancing. At one point, Let It Go from Frozen comes on, and everybody sort of rolls their eyes, except for me, who jumps right up onto the table in our group and starts singing this Disney song, just screaming it at my whole group of friends who were... I wasn't the only one up on the table, quite a lot of people were, but all of my friends just looking at me like, oh my God, Ryan, come on, stop. Don't, just get off the table and stop singing Frozen.
Are you the kind of drunk that walks around telling everybody that you love them when you're drunk?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I bumped into a couple of people at the Athena, a few really good friends of mine from about 10 years ago that I hadn't seen for 10 years, and I was quite drunk, and so at one point I'm just stood there with them all when we're all just hugging, telling each other how much we missed each other and how much we love each other and stuff, and it's like I haven't seen these people for 10 years, and now all of a sudden here we are hugging, and I'm like, I'm going to a house party after this, you guys should come along, and of course none of them did, because they were like, okay, this guy's gotten a bit too emotional, but yeah.
I always think that drugs and alcohol amplify the mood that you're in. So usually when I get drunk, I get more morose.
More morose? Oh my God.
It's like it comes out.
As if it doesn't have enough time to come out when you're sober.
Well, at least I'm slightly in more control of it when I'm sober. When I'm drunk, I can't help it.
No, honestly, I become in such a good mood. It becomes unbearable. The amount of laughing, jokes, the use of humour, the smiling, the laugh, all of it just gets amplified like 10 times to the point where I'm suddenly everybody's best friend.
You're one of them.
Yeah. one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we went to the Athena, and then we went back to this house party, and then at about 1 o'clock, I was like, let's go out. Let's go out. Let's go get drunk. Let's go to a club. And so we all went to Helsinki, and we're all stood in Helsinki, and I'm just dancing with these random strangers I've never met before. And I never even got their names, but we were there just dancing together, having a great time, smiling, laughing, until about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that is the point of kind of club culture. It breaks those boundaries down. That is the idea. That is the benefit of it.
I remember there was this one very strange guy who, because it's a gay club, I was stood next to this guy, and he looks me. We were chatting a little bit, and he looks me dead in the eyes, becomes very serious all of a sudden, and goes, "Are you straight?" And I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, good, me too. Let me buy you a shot." I was like, "What?"
You bonded.
Yeah, I was just like, "This is really weird, man."
Yeah,
but
two fish out of water.
Yeah,
yeah. But I keep promising to take friends with me to some of the gay bars in Leicester, but that boat is that ship has sailed. Never again,
No, I can see you busting a move in Helsinki when Dua Lipa comes on.
It must be 10 years since I've been there, and I hated it. It's because it's the chaos. It's the control and order over the chaos again.
I mean, I loved it. There we were having a great time, and as it becomes busier and busier, it reaches a certain point. I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe like 2:30, and suddenly all of the drag queens start walking in, and you're like, "This is great." You don't get this at like the other shitty clubs that the 16-year-olds pretending to be 18 go to, like Mosh. It's just everybody's there pretending to be really cool, but as a result it's just become kind of flat and boring.
It's the artifice of youth, isn't it? You have to project something, and when you reach the point where that you realise that it's facile, you can't compete with it. I'd love to be able to project in that kind of way, but it would take a lot more effort, and like 6 months in the gym and all that kind of stuff, and an expense account with some decent clothes.
Who wants to go to the gym, Rob?
Well, only for the personal health benefits.
How superficial and vain of you to suggest that we should go to the gym.
We should look after ourselves, but it depends the reason that you're going for.
No, we should live fast, destroy our bodies, and then leave a pretty corpse.
Yeah, and then reach your 40s and realise that you should have looked after yourself in your 20s. Yeah. All that smoking and drinking, you can only do it once. Yeah, but that kind of in the face of chaos, what do you do? Do you embrace the nihilism, or do you embrace the chaos and do you go with it, or do you hold back and try and restrain some kind of order?
No.
That's what J.G. Ballard's such a great author to read. So something like The Drowned World. I mean, it's repetitive because he talks about the social breakdown of society, and you reach this point of extremes where like with High Rise and you reach this point where just everything starts to break down, and the individual, the protagonist in the novels, is the person who has to find something within themselves to either go through that process of they become something else in the process of going through the destruction, but it's about saying that ordered society, that representation of order that is seemingly around us is superficial. There is no order. There is no stability. It is chaos.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I love Bret Easton Ellis and his novels. American Psycho in particular is great for that, because it's, like 90s, what is he, like an ad executive or something, like high-powered businessman with this veneer of order that exists up until a certain point of the novel where you kind of keep getting these, like, the implications of violence and the implications of chaos until at a certain point it tips over and you realise what all of the chaos and disorder and violence that lurks underneath.
Sociopaths underneath.
Yeah. To like a truly, one of the great things about his books is that chaos it never feels glamorised, because he takes it so far that you just feel sick to your stomach the whole time whilst reading them. And then it's like, you get to the end of American Psycho and he's sat there and you're not sure whether whether it was real or whether it was in his head, and it just ends on the idea that there's just no exit, there's no escape from this chaos. That's what it is, and you just kind of, you either have to accept it or let it destroy you.
So when you're in your next client meeting and you're passing around your business cards, and your fantasies of wielding an axe are not far away.
No, they never are. No, there are some of my clients I would happily wield an axe on. No names, because I'll probably get arrested.
But the fantasy is always there.
The fantasy is always there. The rage against the pure incompetence of some of the people that you have to deal with in a corporate setting is insane. You look at them and you deal with them and you think, how do you even know how to wipe your ass? Like,
how do we tell kind of the difference between somebody who is able to articulate that is whether they're a prophet or a siren? How do we, Brett, this is 40 years ago we wrote that.
Yeah.
The start of, Reaganism, Thatcherism, and we're kind of seeing if you look at the whole of the podcast in itself, the politics situation at the moment, and the just the destruction of the mindset that has propped up Thatcherism or neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it, which seems to be falling apart before our eyes, and all of the contradictions and the veneer of control, surface control, has been taken off, and what we're seeing is the chaotic, worms, crawling away over the, it's like the skin off the corpse kind of thing. It's off the cadaver, and who's our modern? Who should we be looking to? Because I really don't know this, and this is a thing for the future, I suppose, is who are the, and maybe we need to go, this is something we need to talk about in the future, about going around and finding those people who are tuned into this, so what they're projecting forward, that will be the mindset, the spirit of the future, the next 40 years.
No, it's interesting, because in a modern setting, I really don't know, maybe I'm not as clued into these things, because all of the examples that come to mind are like, they're from the 80s, the 90s. Like I'm thinking of like Alan Moore's V for Vendetta or Terry Gilliam's Brazil, stuff like that. But contemporarily, I'm not entirely sure. You have to be quite clued into these things to be able to pick it out, because when you think of contemporary cinema, the first thing that comes to mind are things like Top Gun Maverick or like the Marvel movies, and at that point you're only really dealing with the veneer of things.
That's the interesting part, is that kind of meta. I haven't used the meta-modern word for a while, but that interest and dynamic of what is the dynamic of the meta-modern age in terms of who are the prophets or the sirens of meta-modernity.
Now that I'm thinking about it, even in a sort of modern sense, that stuff has been folded into the mainstream in a way that's almost seamless. I'm thinking of the recent Moon Knight TV show. Wasn't the tagline for that show "Embrace the Chaos"? And it was all about that chaotic nature of the self and how to navigate it.
Don't embrace the grey man on Netflix.
As I was sitting here waiting for you, I saw that tweet and I couldn't help but laugh.
I got through
'cause
30
it looked
minutes.
horrible.
It's awful. And yet I looked on Twitter, and it's like I seldom go through what's trending, but I looked at it, and there were a few, and it literally is 50-50. It's a Marmite film. 50% of people, if something has to promote itself as the new James Bond, somebody in the marketing department has gone, this is a rubbish film, we need to over-egg it, we need to gild the lily here. It's not very good, is it? It's for apparently spending $200 million on making the film and marketing it.
There are some big stars attached, aren't they? And didn't the directors, aren't they the guys that did
one of the Avengers?
Yeah.
But it's just awful. It's just unwatchable.
I didn't have to watch it, and I could have told you that, Rob.
I literally was sitting there going, is this for real? It just chops and changes. And it's like the characterisation is just What is going on?
Oh, something made me laugh. I think I was scrolling through Twitter, and one of the adverts for the film literally used the phrase "all killer, no filler," and I thought this is going to be bad.
Yeah, it's like a B movie. That's it should be a straight to DVD movie, and it should have, if it was done on like a tenth of the budget, it would have been much better.
In a way, it kind of is, because it's not had a theatrical release, has it? It's gone straight to Netflix.
I think they might have put it out in 1 or 2 cinemas. You know, that kind of thing where they can claim it's a theatrical release.
That's where they dump all the crap now, isn't it? Netflix buys it up, and then it just gets dumped there.
Netflix commissioned it. I think because they've got the data that must tell them that this is. You know, they've resurrected Adam Sandler's career.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, then it's a different problem, isn't it? Because you can't generate interesting films through an algorithm, which seems to be what they're trying to do.
I think they probably learnt the same thing. You know, it's a clickbait film. It's an indignation film. You know, it's so bad it's good type of film, and I think that's what they're dependent on.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're trying to sell it solely, because I don't know anything about the film other than that Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling are in it, and it's directed by the guys that did The Avengers. Well, so I think they're trying to sell it solely on that basis.
You pretty much summed up the whole film.
Yeah.
Billy Bob Thornton's in it, I think. Is that his name?
Oh my God.
And it's like kind of... That pretty much that's all you need to know about the film, that these people are in it, because it's not of any kind of
there are
aesthetic or cultural value other than it literally is trash.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of films like that. What is the one that came out not that long ago? Was it called Red Notice or something? The one starring... The only thing that was remotely remarkable about that film was Ryan Reynolds was in it, The Rock was in it, and that was the film. And it's them playing off each other in horribly forced ways for like 2 hours, and then the film ends, and you're like, okay, I feel like I killed myself whilst watching that film.
Two agents have got together and said, we need a vehicle for our clients.
Yeah.
And somebody said, let's find a job and producer and director, and they'll just do a series of sequences, and there won't be any story. So at least with something like, you know, you've got the man who would be king was Sean Connery and Michael Caine.
I don't think I've seen it.
Very famous film, and two really big stars. It's based on a Rudyard Kipling story.
Okay.
But it's based on a tested story, whereas these movies seem to be
just derivative to the extreme.
Sequences of video games that they thought they were trying to shove into a movie, as if everybody's just going to lap it up. And it was like, I honestly have not seen anything so bad in ever such a long time. It was nearly as bad as, what was that one with the guy who plays Tom Holland, where I can't remember what it was called. It had the woman from Star Wars in it, Daisy Ridley in it, and they were on a planet, and the guys on this planet, their thoughts come out. It's like a thought bubble kind of comes out, so they have no privacy for what they're thinking.
Are you sure this wasn't a fever dream that you once had?
No, it's a film, but again, it's just awful.
Yeah.
It's like, but I never liked that one, that eco one with Jennifer Lawrence and who's the guy who spends a lot of money on jets, Leonardo DiCaprio. The one that about the meteor coming and striking the air.
Oh, Don't Look Up. I did like Don't Look Up. It was very on the nose, all the time. You wouldn't give it any awards for being well written.
Maybe it's like, if in 10 years' time you go and look at the bargain basement bin of all the movies that have come out in the last 10 years that people raved about at the time, and you kind of go, actually, they were awful.
Well, this is one of the great innovations of the 21st century, Rob. You don't need a bargain bin anymore. The bargain bin is Netflix.
Quite. It just it's where you position yourself, isn't it? It's just
it's been weird as well to watch that transition, because I remember when Netflix was first coming out and was still relatively new. For a reasonable period of time, if something was a Netflix original, it was going to be good. There was a level of quality there that was maintained over the few projects that they were pushing out, like Orange is the New Black was really good for a time. House of Cards was good for a time, and some of the original films that they were pumping out were really good. But now,
well, they got panned for that, Persuasion, version of Persuade, the Jane Austen movie that they've just released.
I don't remember
It's
that.
universally panned by almost everybody, viewers and critics alike. And
Well, if there's one thing we don't need today, it's some more Jane Austen films. Like, give it a rest. Jesus.
Well, the interesting thing is watching. I think the real entertainment is in watching the Twitter feeds of people moaning about Netflix.
I do love that. Yeah.
That's where the fun is now. It's kind of say, okay, it's not just me then. It's like, the number of people have said, I'm getting rid of my subscription now. If I could get rid of my BBC subscription license fee, then I'd be very happy to. But unfortunately, it's like there's a legal requirement that you've got to have this thing, and it's
Well, when I was a student, I just didn't have one. Because you can.
With the when you're living collectively, you can.
Yeah, because when I was living by myself in a privately rented flat with my friend, and we never hooked the TV up to the aerial, and you can let them know, like, look, I'm not using my TV for television. I'm never going to watch it, so I'm not paying.
Yeah.
And I never did.
Yeah.
And my life was infinitely better than not having the TV on, because it's just like, whenever you turn it on, there's nothing good on. There's nothing you ever want to watch. It's
We're
all
watching
crap.
Drag Race Canada, because that's on BBC. It's mildly entertaining. I mean, it's
But isn't that stuff on Netflix as well? Because I remember watching watching a ton of Drag Race when I was at university, and it was all on Netflix.
Well, that was the lockdown watching that we did, all 14 series or whatever it is of Drag Race America. The original one starting at the very beginning. It was like kind of. We watched a lot of that, and now it's kind of like it's quite familiar that the worst one actually is the Australian one.
Really,
just vile, horrible people just come across as really vindictive and nasty. There's a French one, which I think is being broadcast in France at the moment, but I'd like to see that one. But the Canada one's actually one of the better ones.
I'd quite like to see the UK one to see what that's like, but. Because I've only ever seen the American one.
Well, how many times do you need somebody riffing off jokes about chips and pies?
Oh my God!
That's the UK one.
Maybe I will give it a miss then.
Well, I mean, it's sample it in pieces. But it isn't. It isn't exactly sophisticated thingy. It isn't satire. It isn't restoration comedy.
No,
it's not going to last for 200 years, and people will be coming back to it to readapt it. Although there might be something in there that comes out of it. Right? Okay, we've probably been chatting enough. So, have you got anything coming up this week?
God, have I got anything coming up this week? I don't think so. I started watching that. When I say started, I watched the first 12 minutes of it before I passed out from exhaustion. But I started watching Miss Marvel, which seemed quite good. The kind of thing that you can just sort of, another superhero thing that you can turn your mind off to. It seemed charming and sweet enough, so I figured I'll watch that.
Any books?
Maybe work my way through Good Omens now that I've very briefly started that, because that seemed just like a fun, light read. I mean, Neil Gaiman's stuff always seems to be fairly consistently good, and I've not read much Terry Pratchett either, so it'll be interesting to read that. And again, the same as usual, a lot of comic books. I'm about 2 weeks behind on the weekly releases of stuff that have been coming out, so I'm going to push my way through some of those. A lot of interesting things happening in the X-Men at the moment, Rob, that I'm sure you're well aware of.
No. and probably never will be.
Yeah.
but you can educate us about that.
You don't need to be educated about that, Rob. Honestly, it'll make your life worse.
And yet you keep doing it.
But I keep doing it, Rob. I keep plugging away.
Well, I've got a big, massive, fat book of German idealism that I started to read, and I do want to get to. I'm finishing off this. I've got about 60, 70 pages of this young book that I picked up. I want to crack through that today or tomorrow, and I've got another young related book which I want to get through. Jason Smith's we've mentioned his podcast before, so that's pretty good. And then I might get back to reading about 18th, 19th century German idealism just for some light reading.
Yeah, the kind of thing you can casually dip into before bed.
It's like a brick.
Yeah.
I'm working my way through that book of Eastern religions that I picked up from the charity shop that we saw it a few weeks ago. And I popped back in there at some point and picked it up, the Dummy's Guide to Eastern Religions.
Oh yeah.
And it's actually very, very easy to understand. So that's going to take me a while. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs of that before I fall asleep.
Sounds much more highbrow than my plans.
Well, I do probably need to pick up some trash at some point, so I must do that.
Oh, come with the comic book store to me. We'll find you something.
Pictures.
Oh, I didn't realise I was sat here with a Philistine.
I'd have to project some sincerity into my interpretation of these pictures. I don't think I can do that. Yeah. Right. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I'm on Twitter under @Clayton Comics with an X instead of a C and an S.
And if you want to get in contact with me, if you want to take part in this podcast, you're more than welcome to. It was just the two of us actually at the moment because I don't put much effort into organising them. So if anybody wants to come along and take part, you're more than welcome. We can get more coffee and we can plug in extra microphones, or we could do it online or something. So, but if you want to get in contact, it's Rob W Media and on Twitter and Instagram. And I think my website's called robwatsonmedia.net.
You don't know what your own website's called? Oh, have I got a bogey?
No. It's like,
oh, Jesus.
No, I think it was the thing off the milk off the tin.
No, it's definitely a bogey.
Okay. What an amazing way to finish. Until next time. You've been listening to Distraction Therapy with me, Rob Watson. Find out more at robwatsonmedia.net or follow me on Instagram and Twitter @RobWMedia.